All right, well, it is 8:30 a.m. So we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. As I said last time, this is a volunteer effort, so really appreciate everyone's time and willingness to participate, especially at the end of the year here. So with that, Krista, would you mind doing a roll call?
Sure. Caroline Traub.
Here.
Nancy Bernard.
Here.
Valerie Graber.
Here.
Tom Jensen.
Here.
Jonathan Jones.
Here.
I think Ken Kiker has resigned, so that position is now vacant for the state fire marshal. Mike Lubliner.
Here. Krista, I will have to leave in an hour and Jonathan will be my alternate when I leave. I have a 62 ASHRAE meeting. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Chris McCarthy.
I am here.
Mark Rabel.
Here.
Andrea Smith.
Here.
Brandon Stock.
I'm here.
Jeff Urich. And he was not going to be available until after 10. Okay, so we do have a quorum.
Great. Nancy, I see you have your hand up. What's up?
Are you going to try and get a fire marshal to replace the man who resigned?
I believe so. Yeah, I think Ray on staff who did work on the fire code is doing some outreach to see if we can find a replacement.
What about?
Right, he's put the word out to the State Fire Marshals Association.
Yeah, that's kind of critical. Thanks.
Great. Is there anyone from the public who would like to be recognized at this time? Okay. And yeah, just to reiterate that, a quick note or reminder about tag openings. We still have openings on this tag for someone to represent construction trades and utilities. And then as we just discussed, the fire marshal representative is now unable to participate. So if you know anyone interested in representing any of those three views on this tag, please have them reach out to SBCC staff. I think, Krista, this means we are also officially at 10 members for the time being. So we need 5 people for a quorum.
Yes.
Hey, Caroline,
Yes.
this is Nick with the Washington State Fire Marshal's Office. My chief has asked me to sit in on this meeting.
Great. Welcome, Nick. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy it, you can feel free to apply for the tag role. Great. So today's agenda is here in front of you. We've done item 1. Item 2 is to review and approve the agenda. Then we will review and approve the minutes from last week. Item 4 here is the bulk of our time today. We'll be focusing on IMC chapters 1, 2, 3, and 7 through 15. And if we get through all of that, hopefully we will, hopefully we can give ourselves the holiday gift of adjourning early. So would anyone like to make a motion to amend the agenda or to approve as shown?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
I second it.
Great. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Great, motion passes. So next up is to review and approve the meeting minutes from last Thursday's meeting. So Krista's got those up on the screen. rolling through them. Let you all take a brief look. I think those were posted a couple days ago. So would anyone like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from last week?
I make a motion to approve the meeting minutes from last meeting.
Thank you, Valerie.
And I second it.
Thanks, Tom. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
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 Anyone opposed?
I,
Oh, wait, either. Great. All right, motion passes. Excellent. So we are now on to item 4. So as we discussed last time, we are really in the first part of this code cycle update process where we're just focused on the 2 items, the existing amendments review and the significant changes review. So the goal with the existing amendments review is to look at each 2018 amendment and see if there's a 2021 change to that section that somehow impacts that amendment, either by modifying or removing it. So on this one, staff had already gone through that Excel doc and made a recommendation of what to do. So the tag member task was really just to review that recommendation and determine if you agree or would like to suggest a tweak of some sort. And then the second item is the significant changes review. So looking at the 2021 red line and significant changes reports that everyone received for their sections and list out and briefly describe each change and then to recommend whether we should adopt that change or not. Nancy.
sorry to interrupt, but I was trying to go directly to the website to access all the documents. And I'm certain this didn't happen last week, but I'm getting all the 2018, 2019 stuff. I'm not seeing 2021 on the website. Krista, what am I doing wrong?
Let's see. Yeah, Krista's got her screen up there. Maybe she can show everyone how to navigate there. Just that's important so everyone knows where our documents live.
That
Let
is
me
not-
unmute. You can do this 2 ways. And I'm still stuck in the old way. There's a new way going through the code adoption cycle. Go down to mechanical.
What? Whoa, wait a minute. That's the problem. I'm on the SBCC website and I don't think it's the new one. Do you guys have a new, you just stick that URL in the chat and I'll try that. But I don't understand why I'm ending up just
We
like
have a chat.
ancient history. We should, don't we?
I think it's disabled for this meeting. It's just sbcc.wa.gov.
sbcc.wa.gov.
GOV.
Oh, okay. Yeah, now I get the new one. That is so weird. All right, thank you. Sorry.
No, thanks, Nancy. I appreciate you bringing that up just so everybody knows where all of our.
Well, I'm gonna have to delete all my old links. They go to ancient history before COVID. That's ancient history to me.
Yeah, this was updated probably about 1.5 years ago now. So
I know, but you would think the links would go there.
actually, I think it's almost 2 years now. Yeah, and the other one should be disabled, so I'm not even sure how you were able to get to it.
No, and it makes me worried. I've been using those old links and not paying attention to the dates. Whew. Okay, thanks. Sorry, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah, so just as well, before we dive in here, just another reminder that in this phase of the process for the mechanical code, we're not changing or updating something that does not directly pertain to an interaction between an existing amendment and a significant change. So if there are ideas to clean up existing sections or remove or change requirements or something in that vein, just a reminder, those ideas will need to be submitted as a code change proposal, and the 60-day window for those submissions will likely start later this winter. And then the third and final task for this tag will be to review those proposals, likely sometime in late spring or early summer. So today, yeah, our focus is on IMC chapters 1 through 3 and 7 through 15. I think Krista received everyone's homework and notes, so thank you so much for that. Gold stars all around. So we're just gonna have each person run through and quickly present their work and thoughts and allow for discussion on any topics. And kind of for ease of discussion today, Krista combined the amendments review and the significant changes into one document. So as we go, we can also fill in any gaps in the reports. Most importantly, if any of the recommendations are unclear or are blank, we'll want to make sure that we fill those in just so the outcome of each item is clear. And then at the end of today, I think we'll just do one vote to approve the recommendations we have noted. That said, if we get stuck on anything, we can certainly leave items open for additional research until the next meeting. We might also not vote on the definitions chapter, since our January 6th discussion on ventilation might impact some of our thoughts here. So we might leave that one open. And then as Krista noted, I think Jeff had chapter 1, but he cannot join us until 10 a.m. So we are going to go ahead and get started with chapter 2. So before we let Andrea jump in, does anyone have any questions on any kind of logistics or anything for today? Awesome. So with that, Andrea, take it away.
Yeah. So for existing amendment reviews, I'm going to look at my stuff just because there's a lot going on on the screen. Basically, so balanced whole house ventilation. I definitely think that we should accept the staff recommendation of removing the state amendment and then accepting the second sentence for the code exception, moving it to chapter 4. But aside from that, the rest of the amendments for this section, I agree with staff that we should retain them. And then for, let's see here, significant changes. So mostly there weren't any huge significant changes until chapter 3, but essentially I said to adopt all of the definitions within chapter 2, but to keep the 202, to keep the balanced ventilation whole house definition that we have, rather than the code language for 2021, just because they're so similar. And then I also had, I guess, a clarifying question, is that there were a lot more definitions listed in the ICC, but aren't listed within our Washington codes. And I didn't know if we wanted to add a bunch of those or not. I don't know what the group's consensus would be on that, on whether or not it would be way too many definitions, or if it would help create more clarity and reduce any questions and reduce the amount of staff time in answering those questions. So I guess I'll leave that to the group. So that's about it for chapter 2. It's fairly straightforward just because they're definitions.
Thanks. Thank you so much. Krista, did you want to touch on Andrea's question about listing out a bunch more definitions?
Sure. The only ones that are listed in the WAC are those definitions that we amend or introduce as a state amendment. Everything else is just adopted by reference. So it is still adopted even if it is not shown in the WAC. And we can't really copy over all of the IMC and put it in the WAC. That would be a violation of copyright of the
Gotcha.
SBCC. So what we do is only list those that we have state amendments for.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good to know. Alrighty. So for chapter 3.
So sorry, Andrea,
sorry.
before you move on, I was curious if anyone else had thoughts on the balanced whole house ventilation one. Krista, one other minor difference between them I noticed was in the first sentence of the current Washington version, there's also the words residential unit that are different from the proposed or from the 2021 IMC. So where it says any combination of concurrently operating residential unit mechanical exhaust, yeah, that exactly is also kind of another difference. So just wanted to see what folks thought about if that was important. And then I think the or 5 CFM, whichever is greater, if that's another element of the Washington Amendment that we want to keep, just because it creates a little bit more flexibility or maybe a little bit more practicality for this one. And then also just the title of it. I think this came up last time as well, just if the obviously whole house is in the title of the Washington version, but not in the title of the 2021 IMC version. And so having those references. So I was just curious what other thoughts folks had on this. And we can also put it in a parking lot if we think it would be better discussed after we had talked about the ventilation chapter.
Carolyn?
Yes, Mike.
Yeah, and it may be better to wait till the ventilation chapter, but I did want to maybe a minute just to provide my perspective on this as it relates to residential and particularly low-rise multifamily residential, which this is what the scope of the IMC is, as I understand, a part of the scope. So the first thing is that we know that there are some heat recovery and energy recovery ventilators out there that are residential that have LED indicators of their flow rates. So one can ascertain during commissioning or afterwards whether they're in balance within that number. I'm not sure, given that we're talking about very low flow rates in an apartment, 5 CFM is 10% of 50, and we're getting down to 30 in some apartments. So it's problematic in the sense of for enforcing it from a building official standpoint. If they were to go to the certificate that is required that has those flow rates written down on it, and those are permanently affixed in the home, it's somewhat problematic when you get down to those flow rates to get that level of precision with various ways of balancing. I will check in between now and the next meeting with the manufacturers that do the digital displays. I think those are excellent because they let everybody know when maintenance is necessary as well. And that's critical to the operation of the system, maybe not to the code. The other one is that they'll put pressure taps on these units, and the contractor installing them will take a micromanometer, and there'll be a calibration that converts it from pascals to flow, and then they can measure the supply and the return and ascertain. Other than that, any other attempt to do this on the exterior grill with wind blowing and noise, or trying to do a pitot traverse in often inaccessible ducts is problematic at best. So just something to point out, but I think I don't have a solution for the definition other than maybe to provide some guidance, not necessarily in the definition, although maybe it's needs to be, the guidance needs to be when we get into the actual discussion of the balanced ventilation requirement. But I think it's really, really important because we don't want something in there that's can't be repeated. If a building official sees the certificate and looks at the number and says, wait a minute, this one is is greater than 5 CFM, different than the other one. It could be hard, and they'll just ignore it after that. So this is an issue I brought up the last time, and it may be appropriate. I just wanted to share that information. I'm sorry for taking more than a minute, but I think it's important that we discuss it because, in effect, we believe that all of these low-rise multifamily are going to require this, and they're going to require right now numbers. So we want these numbers to be repeatable and accurate, and we want to provide guidance on how one gets there and what devices can and can't be used. In a commercial building, and doing a pedo traverse or a flow capture may be adequate, but in these small residential units, it's very problematic. Thank you very much for indulging me.
Thanks, Mike. Great comments. Any other thoughts on this particular one?
I agree with Mike. We should probably side table this one for a little bit more investigation on that. That is very problematic, the 5 and 10 degrees CFM difference. Caroline, I don't know why you wanted to get rid of the residential unit other than the fact that whole house is for residential. Is that why you were just getting rid of some verbiage?
I wasn't suggesting getting rid of it. I was
Okay.
writing, that it was another kind of difference, that if the staff recommendation right now is to accept the 2021 definition as it's written, just that phrase of the Washington amendment would be another difference that we would be incorporating if we did that.
Okay, and then we are leaving up, like Mike said, the balancing to the jurisdictions to try to figure out how they can actually accomplish that. And with R2 occupancies, there's going to be quite a few of these in some of these buildings. So we should table this for a little bit more discussion. Maybe Mike can look at the manufacturer's information a little more for us. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie. I think that's a great suggestion. So Mike, maybe we'll put this on your homework to do as part of the January 6th conversation. Awesome. Thank you. Great. Anyone else have any other comments on chapter 2 before Andrea moves to chapter 3? Awesome. All right.
Alrighty, so for chapter 3, existing amendments, I didn't see anything that's immediately stood out to me. And so I think I'll go with the staff recommendations of retaining those as well. There was only 4 of them. So, and then to go down to significant changes, really, I would say the only one that's, I don't know, I guess more significant than the others, is the 307.2.1.1. So yeah, and I also, I guess I had a question. Well, I guess it's not really a question, never mind. But yeah, so I think that I kind of put in the reviewer comments like what each change is. And really, I think that none of them are too crazy, and they're just more clarifications. So my recommendations would be to adopt them, and I can go into detail about it, but it's all like on the screen. So if you have any questions, it's totally fine.
Andrea, this
Yep.
is Valerie. I'm doing the fuel gas code, and the condensate drains actually match exactly for the IMC as they do the fuel gas. They added that as far as labeling the primary and secondary drain.
Mhm.
And then the fuel gas actually goes into a little bit more. It says it needs to be permanently marked. So it gives a little bit more description on how to actually mark those condensate pipes.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Great. So Krista, should we have in the far right column for chapter 3, then all of those, our recommendation is to adopt?
Okay,
Andrea, that's what I thought I heard you say.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. Any other thoughts or comments on chapter 3? All right. Well, moving on ahead then, I think next up is Mark, who did chapters 7, 8, and 9. So we can scroll down to those. And Mark, if you want to walk us through any of your thoughts.
Yeah, sorry, it's kind of a mess. I was kind of throwing my thoughts on here. This first chapter 7, I guess, pretty much references the International Fuel Gas Code. It seems like there's no updates as far as I could tell from what I was reviewing. So I moved past this one and went to 8. And then on 8, the first significant change that I saw was this block vent switch. I know it's typically on the condensing boilers that we put in there. It looks like it's adding it to oil-fired appliances as well. I just kind of threw my thoughts on here about potential nuisance trips and avoiding shutting these down on accident when it's cold, if there's nobody maintaining it. Those are my thoughts, but it seemed like the safety portion of it was good enough to just adopt this portion as well. And I kind of went crazy on the mend yes versus no. I think it doesn't need an amendment. This is like a new thing and we can just adopt this, I think, from what I can tell. But willing to hear what other people think as well. I mean, I don't know if anybody read through this chapter.
This is Valerie Graber again, and I'm doing a course of fuel gas. So I've got the vents and flues as well. And I'd like to share some fire safety issues that I have found in construction. Since we've gone to high efficiency gas appliances, they use PVC combustion air and venting pipes. They are being fire stopped throughout construction, and that's not good. They're not being provided with shafts because if you can't fire stop or collapse the vent or the combustion air. And I'm going to write in a code change for 2021 or a state amendment to cover that. And I don't know if all appliances have a shutdown. If like the vent or the combustion air gets blocked, a boiler or any gas appliance would be in jeopardy, especially a boiler. So I was going to look into more about the shutdowns as well to find out if they do, all appliances have to have a shutdown.
I know on the condensing boilers that I've been installing, the manufacturer has been recommending one of these block vent switches.
Yeah, but that's a recommendation, and whether or not it, if you fire stop a vent pipe, PVC pipe, because in the past boilers had B vents and it was obvious you could not fire stop them. They had to be shafted. But now that they're PVC, people go in there and they think everything can be fire stopped, but it cannot be fire stopped. So it is a problem in the field. Building inspectors will come through and fire stop everything. They see a pipe, they're going to fire stop it. And we're right now at Bellevue, we're trying to put a stop to that. So I'm going to put in for a code change statewide for that.
Okay.
Thanks, Valerie. So Mark, is the recommendation here in that final column again, just adopt instead of
Yeah,
there? Okay.
that's what I'm thinking. I guess kind of depending on what Valerie comes up with too to match what's lining up with their fuel gas code.
Yeah, and that would have to be approved anyway. So we can move forward on this and then we'll have to move backward on any code proposed changes.
And then just some changes that weren't significant. They were changing some walkway to walkway. Not much change to that. And then some renumbering. They added a line 805.3 for factory built fireplaces, requiring to meet UL 127. Seemed to make sense to me. And then they just renumbered the numbers below 805.3. So I would say, again, not an amendment, but just kind of adopt what the change in the IMC was. That's all I had for 8. Going into 9, there was a significant change, bringing wood burning residential hydronic heaters. I've actually never worked on one of these, but it seems appropriate to bring it up to EPA standards. I don't know if anybody else has experience with one of these or know how popular they are, but it seems like, again, this is new. I don't know that it needs an amendment, but probably adopt the IMC would be my recommendation. Um, 918 added an additional testing certification, UL/CSA noted there. It just seemed like a more stringent testing. It seems like they still allow you to do the old testing plus this new testing procedure. I did see that it noted that it kind of gets up to Canada and Europe standardized testing and keeping up with technology. So it seems like a good thing to adopt as well. It doesn't seem like it's in the design other than specing something that meets this testing. It seems like it lands more on manufacturers building it and testing it to the standard. So I guess I would also recommend adopting this added testing and certification UL listing. This one, I wasn't quite sure exactly what they were trying to get at on 920.4, but they're getting unit heaters out of I2, group I2, corridors, stairways. I'm not sure if they're just trying to get it out of there for access or if they're trying to get gas-fired unit heaters out of there. From what I was looking at on other states that are reviewing this, I believe they are putting an amendment in because this does not address what type of unit heater it is, whether it's gas, hydronic, or electric. So depending on what I guess what the intention of this code is, if it's just to get gas out of these spaces, can we still use hydronic and electric in those spaces? I don't know if anybody has any more feedback on that.
Was there anything in the significant changes that explained that code? Sometimes they have a little verbiage underneath the code change, and when they make a change, I know they're getting rid of gas. I mean, gas appliances aren't allowed in I2, any memory care. But yeah, they don't specify the type of heater, which is problematic because electricity is actually allowed. The fuel gas code is allowing gas fireplaces in I2 in any lobby area, but not in any of the rooms themselves. But I agree that needs a little more. I think we should actually explain what type of heat they're talking about.
So Caroline, I put yes on there and then say explain type of heater, I guess, whether it's hydronic or electric, or if, I guess I didn't see anything in the significant change documentation, so I don't know exactly what they're trying to get at, but I think we would need an amendment to describe what is not allowed in these spaces.
Okay, that makes sense, Mark. Is that something you want to dig into maybe a bit more? And we
I can dig into that. Yep.
next time. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
And then moving on to 929.1. This is more of a new fixture. It's the alcohol, fuel burning appliances. They're just kind of putting some guidance onto it now that didn't exist before. So I would say it's not an amendment, but we should probably adopt it. And then they add the definition to the section 202 as well. So I would say this is a not an amendment, but adopt this UL reference that's noted in the IMC. Um, 930, I think there was a change in the numbering between the 2018 IMC and the 2021 IMC. So that should probably be revised. And then I would say just adopt. It's just providing clarification to the large diameter fans, just noting ceiling in that title and in that description for clarification. So I would say not an amendment. I would say that's an approved IMC change that's for this code cycle.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Does anyone have any other comments or questions for Mark on chapters 7, 8, or 9? Just that one item Mark's going to look into a little bit more for us and come back with a recommendation to the group. Thank you so much.
Yep.
All right. Chapter 10, I think, Chris, you are up.
Yes. So the significant changes, there wasn't much in chapter 10, just a small verbiage change from 12.5 MMBTU or less to less than. I didn't think that was a significant change. I guess we should, or I would recommend to accept that change without amendment. The other two lines were on the other amendment sheet. They basically just point to the jurisdiction of L&I as applied to boilers. I don't think that there's any reason to change or amend those amendments. So I guess accept as written. I don't think anything in the new code or old code had anything to say about those going to L&I jurisdiction.
Great. And then anyone have any thoughts on those? That seems pretty straightforward. I think, Chris, you also had chapter 12.
Yeah.
I think
you want to jump right to 12 or go to 11?
Let's go to 12. I think, again, Jeff can't join us until 10 a.m.
Okay. There was some additional sections for, I'm not familiar with this. I believe it's a material, CPVC, aluminum CPVC pipe. They added some lines to the tables of requirements for using that type of pipe. Like I said, I'm not overly familiar with those, but I feel like we should accept those changes without amendment.
Agreed. I'm also wondering, Chris, if in that first column, it seems like those ones weren't necessarily significant changes. So maybe we pivot those to no's there as well.
Okay.
Do you agree with that?
Yes. The push fittings may be the same case, or it might not be a significant change. On the thermal barrier, that was really a language change from thermal barrier to insulation and thermal break. I don't know if that would be considered a significant change or not. I don't see any issue with the new language.
Yeah, I had a question about this section as well. This is the one, I think we touched on it last week a little bit with the under slab insulation and how the existing state amendment mechanical code is just calling out the insulation requirement under the slab or under the slab and edge of slab. And I was just curious why. Yeah, and I think you had this in one of your notes, Chris, why we wouldn't just defer to the energy code on that topic and do we the
I
state
think the
amendment?
amendment pointed to the energy code. I didn't know if it was inside or outside of our purview to be sure that the energy code still matched the intent of what they were trying to point to, or if that was something different that we just, I guess, point to it and let it be. I guess I wasn't sure how deep down the hole we go in this. It seems like if it's covered under one code, it really doesn't need to be covered under another code with potential for a conflict.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I went and looked in the energy code to see what I thought the requirement would be, and it does seem like maybe there's a little bit of conflict, but maybe not, because at least in my quick look, it wasn't extremely clear whether snow melt systems were covered. That seemed to be maybe a key difference and maybe one of the reasons why this amendment was in there before, because I think to Krista, the snow melt portion of this amendment showed here like that last sentence is an amendment, but I think some of the other text in this paragraph is also Washington specific.
Yeah, that last sentence just shows the change from the state amendment in 2018 to the current expedited rule that's fixing the mistake from the change in 2018 that was overriding the thermal barrier requirement in 1209.5.1 because 2018 had deleted the slab on grade installation paragraph and pushed it up into 1209.5 instead. So yes, the original intent was to just add the snow of the amendment was to add the snow melt system to it.
Okay, so is this one, Krista, we should dig into a bit more and potentially remove the insulation requirement and refer back to the energy code? Or is the thought that the reason this is in here is because the energy code didn't expressly address the snow melt insulation requirements?
Yeah, I think the intent was to clarify that it would also apply to snow melt systems and not just to interior radiant floor heating.
This is Mike Lubliner. I do believe that R10 is consistent for hydronic heated slabs. Does it? And then under snow melt, it's about controls. That would be R403.9 in the residential code. It's talking about the controls and how to limit some of the issues that were discussed the last meeting. But the way that we have been training on it is that if it's got pipe in it and they're heated pipe, whether it's a radiant floor system within the conditioned space or snow melt system, it has to have the R10 insulation. Sorry, the hotline phone was ringing.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so is the takeaway here on this one that the amendment is still useful because it explicitly calls out snow melt, whereas the IMC does not? Is that?
The snow melt was added for areas like Spokane, so that's really a regional thing in our energy code that was added. That's why the IMC doesn't, it's not getting into that, and nor is that chapter getting into controls. Like Mike said, controls need to actually be linked to the energy code somehow.
Yeah, I think there's a snow melt requirement in the energy code for controls. So I think that's covered. Okay, so it sounds like we should, the takeaway here, or the recommendation, if I'm hearing, is agree with the staff recommendation there to keep the amendment as is. Is that, Chris, what you were thinking?
I think so. It makes more sense now that it's more or less pointing the snow melt to the same requirements as all other slab heat.
I do agree with Chris's assessment that it should change from thermal barrier to insulation and thermal break to be consistent with the other changes within the IMC this cycle.
Okay, so should we update state amendment then maybe to, yeah. All right, Chris, you want to do the rest of these here?
Yeah, so I think 1203.15 is the same as above, not a significant change. I think it should be accepted. It's just push fittings, but for a different type of tubing. You changed orders on me.
Yeah, sorry,
Oh,
I
that's
had
okay.
1209 kind of out of order.
1209.5.2 is just a change in language, the same as it pertains to marking of insulation material. I think we can accept that one without amendment. I don't think it has any major impact on anybody actually doing anything in the field. 1210.6.2, I think, is not a significant change either. We should accept that without amendment. 7.6, the same amendment, just to add a drain on the expansion tank. I think we had a question on this last week. I believe. And if I remember correctly, one of the code documents said that there needed to be isolation valves already, and then the amendment was just the addition of the drain valve. So that could alleviate the concerns brought up last week about draining the whole system if there wasn't isolation valves. So I think accept this without amendment as well. Or retain state amendment, I guess. Yeah, thanks. The 1210.8, I think just cleans up some language from conditions of approval to manufacturer's instructions. I think accept this without amendment. That should cover all the notes from chapters 10 and 12.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. Anyone have any other thoughts or comments on anything in 10 or 12?
Mike Lubiner, this gets back to chapter 8, just an FYI, there is an index on fireplaces in the residential energy code 402.4.2, and talking about factory built fireplaces. It also references UL 127. And then if there are masonry doors, tight fitting doors on masonry fireplaces, it references UL 907. Other than that, 402.4.2.1 is specific to gas fireplaces. And most of these changes were made have to do with energy, not mechanical, but just FYI, if there's a review, that index, that those are the two areas in the code where fireplaces are discussed and overlap with chapters 8. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see. I think that moves us along to chapter 13.
Hi guys, this is Nikki. Is there a reference? Is there that I didn't print out that I'm not finding? Like what you guys are referencing? What like chapters?
Yeah, we're looking currently at the mechanical code, and on the SBCC website, these documents are posted under the agenda for today's meeting is where these can be found.
Okay. Did you say S as in Sam, C as in cat, C as in cat?
Yes, the website is sbcc.wa.gov.
Thank you so much. Sorry about that.
No worries. Thanks for joining. All right, chapter 13. I think, Krista, did you take on this one or someone on your team did?
Yes, I went ahead and did this chapter, and these are all pretty much editorial. They added fittings to the scope of the fuel oil piping chapter and added them to the materials table, standards table. They took out the reference to UL 536. They said that it was irrelevant to the requirement, and they just replaced it with listed and labeled as acceptable for the application. They added a new section for press connect joints and put in the appropriate references for those throughout the sections. The section on copper or copper alloy tubing just got rewritten. So it looks like a substantive change, but it's still pretty much the same requirement. And they was referencing steel. They added steel and stainless steel. And I'm sorry, jumping around a little bit here. But they were all small changes, not significant.
Okay.
And I would recommend that we adopt them all.
Great. Do you mind throwing adopt just in the column so we're all clear on kind of what we recommended? Anybody have any comments, anything they want to bring up on chapter 13?
Yeah, hi, this is Tom. I think we have a little typo that might be worth correcting in 1302.9 under piping systems. Is that supposed to be stainless steel, not still?
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to chapter 14. I think, Mark, you took a look at this one. Mark and Brandon.
Yeah, I did. That first one, it seemed like Washington was already ahead of the curve on amendment, and it looked like the IMC has now been updated to kind of what Washington had as an amendment. So I guess I agree with the staff recommendation to delete that state amendment and go with the IMC now that it matches what the amendment was. And then 14.0 or 1404.1 seemed like it was just adding clarification. I actually don't remember what that one was off the top of my head, but when I noted it down.
Yeah, the clarification was kind of strange. This is Brandon. It was, we can look it up real quick, but it basically took out model number from the code language and, you know, talked about just serial number of the solar collector. So I don't know if that was, I couldn't figure out if there was a manufacturer issue with that where they don't put the model number on, but they mark it with the serial number and not other things. So I tried to do some research on it. I couldn't figure out why that change was necessary, but it seems there's nothing wrong with it.
This is Mike Lubliner. And I haven't looked into how they track serial number and model number, but I know there was the SRC rating system for solar thermal, and it may be that they've indexed it against serial number now, but again, I'm just speculating on that. Yeah. Not having to document the model number because you get the serial number and it has the performance, but I'd have to go back and look at what the latest rules are on the SRCC, I believe it is called.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Brandon and Mark. Thank you, Krista. And then maybe we can just put an N in the no amendments needed for that one too. Okay, chapter 15. Krista, I think you and your team tackled this one as well. Anything specific to highlight here? You want to run through this one?
There were a number of new standards added. A couple of them were for requirements that were added in the last couple of cycles, but the reference standard hadn't been listed, so those were added. We had some existing state amendments that were updating to a newer edition of ASHRAE 15 and 34, and those have been now updated by the model code, so those state amendments can go away. So there were, let's see, these are the additional ASME standards on fittings to go with the new sections added to the refrigeration chapter. And that's where a lot of the new standards come from. And some various other ASTM standards. On tubing. And I'm missing a section. Interesting. There was also just a section showing all of the new updated sections. It doesn't seem to be on my combined document.
Krista, can you tell me real quick where to find that document you've got up?
So if you go to the mechanical code webpage, this is listed as IMC review of chapters 13 and 15.
Oh yeah, okay, got it. Thanks. I need it bigger on my other screen.
And so let's see. Again, we have the existing state amendment to the UL CSA standard that is still a more recent addition than that referenced by the IMC, so we will need to retain that state amendment. We have an existing amendment to the HVI standard that we would need to retain for a state amendment. There were 3 new Nfpa standards added based on changes within the ventilation and ducting chapters. 3 new NSF sections, one of them again being a missing citation from a previous code change. Couple of missing ones from SMACNA added back in. A bunch of new refrigeration standards from UL. And then this is the listing of all of the updated standards.
Okay, thanks, Krista. So it seems like for the new ones, we should just, when you add this into your master document, make it clear that we're recommending to adopt all of those. Anybody have any other thoughts or comments on chapter 15 to bring up?
Well, Nikki over here, I'm looking for the document still, but I did want to apologize. I think there was a meeting last week and I wasn't aware that I was supposed to be doing the meetings or be involved actually. So I just really wanted to say I'm sorry and put that through you guys. I didn't know that.
Thanks, Nikki. Maybe you can reach out to Krista after the meeting and we can just get sorted out what you think your role might be.
Yeah, I'd love to help or do anything. I just learned that this week that I was supposed to be taking, some classes and such. I was just waiting to be able to do that. So I just misunderstood. I just very, very sorry.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, we will sort out which tag or what, what space is here for you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Okay, I see that just in the nick of time, Jeff has joined us. So maybe we can go back all the way to chapter 1. And
Good morning.
Hey, Jeff, thanks for jumping on. So if you could just run through your thoughts and comments, and anybody feel free to chime in along the way.
Okay. The first of such section of comments are pretty low value. Some minor rewording, renumbering, relocating from elsewhere in the code, breaking the construction documents section out to a new section all by itself. Some definition about the code official as a function which will be used throughout the code. And there's one more comment where they got a little inconsistent that I flagged. I would draw our attention to the second page, the fourth one from the top in 109.4 in the 2021 code. So this changed the prescriptive requirement of a 100% of the usual permit fee if you a penalty fee for work commencing before the permit is issued. Now it says the fee is established by the code official, and so that could be higher or lower than the 100% of the permit fee if we don't have a prescriptive requirement for that. So I've flagged that as a potential cost increase. Continuing on from there onto the third page, the one at the top for 112.3. This grants the code official the authority to disconnect service utilities to eliminate immediate hazard to life or property where such utility connection has been made without approval. And that is a new power given to the code official that wasn't in the 2018 code. I guess second from the top on your screen.
Thanks. So just highlighting that one as a significant change.
Just a quick comment on that. We could get to that through the property maintenance code in the past if we saw a bad situation.
Okay. 2 below that, 113.1.
Just before we move on from that, I have a question because I get lots of inquiries from the public. I didn't think the state adopted the property maintenance code. That some jurisdictions do, but very few. Can somebody talk more?
I believe you're correct, because we do refer to it as the Kirkland Property Maintenance Code, so it's not coming from the state necessarily.
Yeah, that's one of my big issues when I get calls from around the state is very few jurisdictions, and I don't even know which ones they are, actually do that. Krista, is there any way we can find out who does adopt the property maintenance code? Not part of this meeting, but offline.
We would have to do a jurisdiction by jurisdiction survey.
Okay, thanks.
You might be able to go through WABO to ask the question, and then that way they could send it out to their membership. That might make it a little easier.
Okay, that's an idea. Thanks. Maybe you can help me, Tom. I'll contact you.
My boss happens to be the president right now, WABO, so I'm sure we could help you there.
Who's your boss?
Kurt Allworth.
Kurt?
Kurt, yep.
Oliver?
Aldworth, sorry.
What?
Aldworth, Aldworth.
Okay, I'm a Kirkland resident, sitting in Kirkland right
Yep.
now.
Yep, I know that. Yeah, so we could email later. I'll find.
Thanks.
Okay, so 2 below that, 113.1 for authority, grants the code officials the authority to issue a stop work order, also a new power, which is then further defined. On 113.4, this was the one where they stopped using code official terminology, and the text in the proposed code or the model code now says authority having jurisdiction. And since that wasn't defined, I would recommend that we modify this to refer to code official again in lieu of authority having jurisdiction.
Any thoughts from any of our code officials on the call about that one?
Can you read that one again, please? Which one were you looking at? The 13.4, failure to comply? The authority having jurisdiction could be the fire department. It could be a lot of different departments. So authority having, it could be actually PSE. So the authority having jurisdiction is kind of specific there.
But for this section,
Mm.
In 113.1, if you just read up 3 lines
Authority.
where I've kind of abbreviated it, yeah, that says where the code official finds any work regulated by this code being performed in a manner contrary to the provisions of this code or in a dangerous or unsafe manner, the code official is authorized to issue a stop work order. And so I agree with the intent. I just thought the language was incorrect for saying the fines are established by the authority having jurisdiction for failure to comply.
Mm-hmm.
I expected to see parallel language used throughout this section.
Okay, yeah, subject to fines established by the authority. Yeah, I agree. And just so you know, Bellevue's has amended this entire chapter. So most jurisdictions have their own chapter, administrative chapter, to set permit fees as they feel, as they need to.
I was going to bring that up too. Kirkland's
Yeah.
done the same, but we should make sure this still works for jurisdictions who haven't done that. So I agree with that
Yeah.
suggestion.
Well, at a high level, these proposed edits do take away a lot of the prescriptive requirements for the fees, for the Board of Appeals and some of those other things to make it more defined at a local level. So maybe you won't have to do so much editing in the future.
Yeah, we essentially rewrite chapter 1 for all the codes in our municipal code so we can do our own fees, and we use hearing exam instead of board of appeals.
And that's also the reason why we historically have not had much in the way of amendments to chapter 1. And the one that we do have is based on statutory requirements.
So Krista, do you need Jeff to write exactly what the modification should be, or is that clear enough if it's just changing a couple of words there?
No, this is clear enough as it is. It's just up to the tag that they want to do.
Okay. Thanks.
My suggestions in the comment box. So that's all I would bring to your attention for chapter 1.
Thanks, Jeff. Anyone have any other thoughts or comments on chapter 1? It sounded like there was kind of consensus with that proposed minor modification. Okay. So let's then cruise on to chapter 11, which I think does have a lot of change in it. And I think Jeff, you and Brandon tackled this one.
Yes, and I did the first half and Brandon did the second half. One of the main changes, if not a major change, is that the IMC is not going to differentiate between ammonia and non-ammonia refrigerant systems anymore, because it's going to defer to a different code for ammonia-based systems. So many of these edits are cleaning up the IMC so that you don't have to have either or code language for ammonia and non-ammonia refrigeration systems. And since they already referred to the other codes, I didn't flag it as a significant change. They just went ahead and completed the referral that they were already leaning toward, it looked like. So
Yeah,
if we go down to,
that's correct. They're directing you to ASHRAE now. So we would have to cross-check any ASHRAE changes.
yeah, it's IIAR.
Yeah, that's totally ASHRAE 15, I believe, or it's in there. That's all in ASHRAE now. So we're trying to get rid of 2 standards.
Correct. And for the most part, that was successful. There are a couple of edits I'm going to bring to your attention that I think need a little bit more work. If we go down to the second page of my notes for section 1105.8, emergency pressure control system. So here, the IMC defers to the IFC. The actual section referenced is not correct for the 2021 IFC, but I think that's pretty easy to fix. My comment basis is that the IFC doesn't do the same differentiation or exclusion of ammonia systems, and so the IMC needs to then explicitly accept ammonia from its reference to the IFC, which is what I tried to explain here. And since the IMC doesn't do that, we would need an amendment. On 1106.4.1, right below your cursor, kind of the same thing, although this time the IMC, when it refers to the IFC has 2 activation conditions for the ventilation system. The IMC restates one of those 2, and I'm proposing that we not restate it. We make an amendment to strike the repetition of the ventilation system activation condition and instead just refer to the IFC. Because right now it's confusing to see 2 conditions in the IFC, one of which is repeated in the IMC when it refers to the IFC. And that's all I would bring to your attention today.
Thanks, Jeff. I guess before we move on to the second half, does anyone have any thoughts or comments on those 2 that kind of relate to interactions between the IMC and the IFC? All right. Brandon, you want to highlight anything in the second half?
Yeah, there's not a ton that is in the state code for this chapter. I think Jeff probably said that I was a little bit distracted on the phone when we got going on chapter 11, but it's essentially a new numbered and new words throughout this section of the IMC. So everything is, none of this has been amended, and I guess I'm not sure how that means is it adopted as part of our code, just based on the fact that it is now part of the IMC. I didn't see anything in my review that really needed amendments, other than just making sure that we've adopted this section of the IMC into our code. So I guess that probably, I guess, that's a question to Krista, I guess, is if it's not currently a numbered amendment in the Washington code, do we need to do anything with this section, as it's a new numbers and new wording in the IMC?
No, since it's adopted by reference, it would be included unless we had an amendment that said it was not.
Okay. Yeah, I think just for reference purposes, what I did was I copied way too many of the sections into this document, likely. So yeah, correct. Everything needs to be no in that section instead of yes. And I did not see any blatant amendments or changes that we would want to make to these to the refrigerant piping, or any of the things listed in here that would make me worry me about anything we'd need to do amendment wise at all. So
Thanks, Brandon. Did you or Jeff, and it's totally fine if you didn't have a chance to see if you thought the IMC changes in this chapter put us in alignment with HB 1050 and kind of the requirements to reference various standards?
I did not review that. I can, though.
Jeff did not either.
Okay, no worries. We can totally tackle that as part of a code proposal, or just it's a legislative change that we'll have to address in this code cycle. But it seems like a lot of the changes, to Valerie's earlier point, reference the correct ASHRAE standards and everything that are part of HB 1050. So.
And also any cost ramifications, in particular, the last one of periodic testing, would that potentially have a cost ramification?
Yeah, sorry, I did miss that. That would be one. And some of the other ones are actually, it looks like they're expanding the type of fittings and things that can be used in refrigerant systems. So it would have a cost benefit to those as far as installation goes.
Good point, Brandon. Anything else in this chapter that had a cost impact? That was kind of the only one highlighted there.
No, not that I can think of, or that I was just taking a look through everything. So no.
Great. Krista, did we miss anything?
I don't think so.
Great. Well, I think at this point, let's remind ourselves we put the discussion of the balanced ventilation definition in the parking lot and gave that as homework to Mike. And then I think wasn't there one other item, Mark, you took a hold of? Oh, yes, the type of heater, and if an amendment there would be appropriate. So we'll revisit chapter 2, and then we will revisit this one item in chapter 9.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay, great. Besides those 2 items, would anyone like to make a motion to approve all of the other recommendations that we...
Carolyn, was there anything about the plugged flue that we needed to re-investigate on that? I can't remember what that, for the boilers, for the
Oh,
efficient boilers and the oil-fired boilers. We talked a little bit about that. I can't remember if that was something we were needing to relook at or not, or if that was just some comments that we made.
I think that's an 8.
yeah, I think maybe Valerie was just pointing out that she was gonna have a code proposal related to that topic. Is that how we landed on that one?
Yeah, I agree with the actual code being added, but yeah, I'm gonna do some more research on actual shutoffs for equipment. So yeah,
Just so you know, most condensing boilers, most of the newer condensing boilers have a system to do that. The oil-fired stuff does not, though.
okay,
In general.
okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Okay. So yes, would anybody like to make a motion to approve all of the recommendations we walked through today, excepting chapter 2 and the one item in chapter 9?
I motion to approve what we went over today.
Thanks, Valerie.
I second that motion with the 2 areas that we want to do more research on.
Thanks, Tom. Any further discussion?
Is there a way that I could, Krista, I think that it was to you to maybe get me some stuff after this so that I can catch up, and maybe if anybody wants my input, I could send it to somewhere, so maybe a contact, or maybe send it back to you, because I'm feeling really behind the 8 ball here this last week, so I really want to catch up, and maybe
let's connect.
that could be
figure it out.
my input.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, all in favor?
I
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion passes. Great. Thank you all so much. This goes so smoothly when everybody is so prepared. So really appreciate it. Krista, yeah, do you want to pull up, I think in the meeting notes, perfect, is the table that kind of shows where we are heading next. Perfect. So our next gathering will be in the new year on January 6th. So we'll be looking at IMC chapters 4, 5, and 6 with Mike, Tom, and Nancy's input and guidance. And then we'll also be taking our first look at the IRC in chapters 12 through 16 with commentary by Jeff, Mike, and Nancy. And then on January 13th, we will tackle the rest of the IRC as well as chapters 1 through 8 in the fuel gas code. Does anybody, we didn't get a volunteer for IRC chapter 18 or 22 last time. Does anybody want to grab those for the January 13th meeting? If not, you can think on it and email me or Krista afterwards if you would like to volunteer for either of those.
This is Brandon. You can throw me on number 17, or sorry, 18.
Okay, you'll take 18, Brandon?
Yep.
Okay, cool, thanks. Okay. Krista, anything else we should cover?
I can't think of anything offhand.
Okay. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all so much, and we will connect in the new year.
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Cheers.
you.
Happy holidays.